So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us for today's Brilliant Minds of UCR webinar. My name is Brianna Morales, and I serve as the Director of Alumni Volunteer Engagement in the Office of Alumni Engagement here at UC Riverside. We are so excited to have you with us to highlight the impactful work happening across our campus and throughout the Inland Empire. Today's session is titled Brilliant Minds of UCR, the Search Center and Autism Research in the Inland Empire. We are honored to feature faculty leaders and alumni whose work continues to advance autism research, training, advocacy, and storytelling in meaningful ways. Before we begin, I would just like to go over a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared via YouTube following the event. All attendees will remain muted during the presentation. We encourage you to submit questions throughout the session using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will reserve time at the end of the presentation for audience questions and discussion. So now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First, we are joined with Dr. Catherine Meltzoff. She is an associate professor in the School of Education here at UC Riverside and a licensed clinical psychologist. Her research focuses on two main themes, neuroscience and differential diagnosis. Dr. Meltzoff conducts transitional studies to explore reward system in ASD, as well as how anxiety contributes to social deficiency in ASD. She plans to investigate school-based interventions for children with ASD and how those interventions affect neural activity, behavior, and school performance. We are also honored to welcome Dr. Jan Blacher, a distinguished research professor in the School of Education at UC Riverside and the Department of Psychology at UCLA. Dr. Blacher is the founding director of SEARCH, the Autism Center here at UC Riverside. She is known nationally for her research on autism, developmental disabilities, and her expertise in autism and special educational programming. Finally, we are pleased to welcome Erik Linthorst, a UC Riverside alumnus and Los Angeles-based writer, director, and producer whose work spans independent film, documentary, and branded storytelling. Over the past 2 decades, Erik has brought numerous projects to the screen that premiered at major festivals, including Sundance and SXSW. His credits include High School, starring Adrien Brody, Come As You Are, released by Samuel Goodwin Films, and the Webby Anthem award-winning documentary Autism Goes to College. Thank you again for being here with us today, and I will now turn it over to our speakers to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Brianna, for that great introduction. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming. I am going to get our slideshow started.
And I will be the first one to speak. So
yes.
while Catherine's getting slides up, you can see my name, Dr. Jan Blacher, and off script a little bit, I'll be talking about SEARCH and our activities today. And fun fact, SEARCH was born in 2008. So we're coming up, pretty soon for a 20-year anniversary. I was the founding director and served as its director for the first decade and a half, and happily have turned the reins over to director Dr. Catherine Meltzoff, whom you just saw. So with no further ado, let's get to it. This slide gives you talking points for this next 40 minutes or so. And think of these as really teasers, because we don't have time to go very deep into each of those topics, because I think in many respects, they could be their own webinar. But let's proceed and learn a little bit about what is SEARCH. So if we could have the next slide, please. SEARCH is actually an acronym. It stands for Support, Education, Advocacy, Resources, Community, Hope. SEARCH got its name back in 2008. And the mission has really not changed. We've only refined and updated our research and our tools. What's unique about Search is that it's both a research and training clinic, and it serves the whole School of Education and is open to any faculty and students there. Graduate students are often funded by, let's say, longitudinal federal grants to do the research on those grants. And in essence, they volunteer to be trained in autism assessment, to get more experience with autistic children. And that's part of their training mission while in graduate school. We offer services free to children roughly ages 3 to 12, give or take. As needed, they're in Spanish, and many families call us and can't be put on our waiting list for one reason or another. Their child doesn't qualify, but we do hold individual personalized office hours with those families to give them directions for the educational pathway that their child will be on. More importantly, Search also is sort of a living laboratory for research, and families can opt in or out to be in research, and students develop their research as part of their mission. Next slide, please. We can't do this kind of search mission alone. It takes a village. And this is the current list of graduate students who are working with Catherine and myself, both in the clinic as well as on their own research. Time doesn't allow us to kind of boast about all of these students, but their topics range from studying oxytocin in autistic teens, studying student-teacher relationships in the early school grades, developing protocols for learning about autism in young college-age adults, and what that means for their future, their self-identity, and mental health. So there's a range of different kinds of projects that we have going on. Next slide, please. So, as you know, Search is the Autism Center at UCR. We are housed and owned, if you will, by the School of Education. We're physically located in Sproul Hall and also at the ED Clinic on Watkins Ave. We see a variety of children with autism, and we have just a few factoids here on this slide. Note that we could fill an entire slide deck full of autism fun facts, but most of you probably know that autism is now considered a spectrum, and the spectrum refers to the range of social skills and abilities that these kids have, as well as the range of kind of interests and behaviors that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. One of the most common questions I get is, how often does this occur? How prevalent is autism? And the latest statistics from the CDC, Center for Disease Control, indicate 1 in 31 elementary school students will have autism. The other kind of top 10 questions is there a cure for autism? And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this, it is that there is no cure for autism, but there are some very good effective treatments and educational programs that make a huge difference and help these children live wonderful, fulfilling lives. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that there were two main characteristics of autism. The social communication difficulties are most commonly known or talked about. And these kids can have challenges in communicating, whether it's verbal or nonverbal. They may not understand social subtleties like emotion or role taking, and generally have difficulty maintaining relationships. Next slide, please. The second main category of characteristics or symptoms is that of, this is a mouthful, restricted interest, repetitive behaviors. Sometimes these are very blatant, like flapping, spinning, or twirling. Other times they're more subtle, where children will peer on the side of a desk or do certain unusual things with their eyes. They may have sensory issues, sensitive to smell or taste or touch. understanding how to assess these characteristics in children is really the forte of my colleague, Catherine Meltzoff, who's going to step in now and talk to you about the autism screening and assessment and share more about the work we do at the Search Center.
All right, thanks, Jan. Hi again, everybody. My name is Catherine Meltzoff, and I'm going to take it over a little bit and talk some about what our procedures are when families call the Search Center and how we actually assess for autism. So the first thing is we have parents or caregivers call us and we do a phone screen with them. And the purpose of the phone screen is just to make sure that the symptoms that the parent is seeing and observing actually align with the clinical criteria for autism, and that it does in fact make sense to see that child. The next step is that parents and child come to the clinic in person. And I'll get to the in-person part in a little bit because we are trying to help develop some telehealth methods in order to make screening and diagnosis more accessible. But as of right now, the gold standard is that everyone comes to the clinic and we do a handful of kind of gold standard diagnostic assessments for autism. And we also have parents fill out some questionnaires. And then after the assessment, probably about, I'd say 4 weeks later, we have an entire report written for families, and we call families to go over those results and answer any questions that they have. Then they receive the written report, and the parents can actually use that report and share it with their insurance company, with the child's school. They can get other services in the community, and essentially the diagnosis can help unlock access to all of these services for their child. So in the phone screen, we talk about general child development, and we also try to figure out, like I said, whether or not it makes sense for us to see the child. Because a lot of times, because of autism being so heavy in the media these days, someone will say like, well, my child's teacher said I should get him or her assessed for autism, but I don't really see it. And so we'll have kind of a question about whether it makes sense to see the child. So in order to maximize the parent's time, child's time, and make sure that it's going to be a productive assessment, we ask about family history, developmental history, to try to figure out whether the child has significant autism symptoms. And even if they don't have significant autism symptoms, so we don't see them, we can oftentimes refer elsewhere. So if a parent is concerned about their teenager who's sad and tearful, and it sounds a little bit more like a mood issue or a possible depression or anxiety, we can refer somewhere else so that the child and family can actually maximize their time and hopefully get the correct diagnosis, even if it doesn't seem like autism is likely. Like I said, the next step is actually seeing the child and the parent in the clinic. So it can be really tricky sometimes to figure out whether a child has autism or something related to autism. So things that often occur alongside autism are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, for example, or ADHD. So sometimes it's hard if we don't actually see the child and like interact with them in person. It can be tricky to tell whether the child is hyperactive or having trouble with attention, or if they actually have symptoms of autism that would rise to the level of a diagnosis. So this is really, really important for us to do these kind of one-on-one interactions live with the child, rather than just having parents answer questionnaires and then us trying to diagnose that way secondhand. We also can look at a child's cognitive abilities. And what I mean by that is their verbal skills, their nonverbal skills, their reasoning skills, things like that. And that helps us understand whether a child might additionally meet criteria for what's known as intellectual disability, which is oftentimes the shorthand is ID, because that helps us understand whether the child might need kind of general services for cognitive challenges, or if they need autism-specific services, or if sometimes they need both. So after the assessment, it's really important for us to keep in mind that our role does not end after the assessment ends, right? Like, if you all have gone to the doctor, which all adults have, if a doctor ever just tells you like, here's your test results and doesn't ever explain them, that can be pretty frustrating because you don't have any context for what that means or what to do next. So best practice is to actually really go over the assessment results and explain clinically why we came to the conclusion we came to. That way, the family can actually not only have the results, but understand them and know how to use them or how they want to use them, what kinds of next steps we recommend, kinds of things that we think might help their children. And they're not just getting a piece of paper that is confusing and full of clinical psychology terms with no context. So that's super important that we kind of keep that momentum and keep that relationship going and act as a resource. That's important to us at Search. So now that I've kind of gone over what Search does in terms of assessing kids whose parents suspect they might have autism, I want to talk a little bit about the research we do at Search. As Jan said, a lot of the research is spearheaded by our incredible PhD students. Our graduate students are often the heart of everything we do. So they are instrumental, and we would not be able to do any of this without them. So I want to highlight them at the top. So we're going to talk a little bit about two broad research projects that Search has going on. I'm going to talk about this first one, and then Jan will talk about the second one. So the first one is about the use of telehealth to diagnose autism. So as you all know, from what I just said, kind of the first step that happens is that a parent might have concerns about their child's development. So the parent is thinking like, I'm wondering if something might be developmentally different about my child. And then they might call us or call another assessment center. And then if it makes sense to see them, the screening happens in person. That's kind of the normative process that's been happening for decades. And then this appointment happens in person, we give results, we give feedback. So again, as you all know, what happened during COVID was the third step, this kind of incredibly important step of being seen in person, shut down completely across the state, across the country, multiple countries. So we all sat there at home, as I'm sure you remember, and got used to Zoom and tried to figure out how to mute ourselves and how to make meetings less awkward from a computer. But clinicians all across the country thought to themselves like, oh no, we have all these families who are still concerned about their children, and we can't do anything in person anymore, with the exception of like some medical emergency appointments, which diagnosis is not usually considered that for autism. So what we at the Search Center did is we thought to ourselves, like, how can we adapt what we do and these assessment procedures to happen virtually? Because we really want to make sure kids still have access to this important diagnostic procedure without having to come in person. So what we did, and other people across the country have done this as well, we turned to telehealth. So we adapted our diagnostic procedures to be able to happen on Zoom, just like I'm on Zoom with you all now. And the research that's come out since COVID, because a lot of this research came about due to COVID, suggests that telehealth, generally speaking, works pretty well to diagnose autism. And there's two main ways that people use telehealth. So the first way is what we're doing right now, right? We're talking in real time. Well, I'm talking and you're listening, but during the Q&A, someone might talk, right? And we're live back and forth. The other way that people might do telehealth is parents might take videos of their kids doing specific things, like, what does your kid's bath time routine look like? What does your kid's mealtime routine look like? And they might be asked to take these specific video kind of clips and moments and then send them to the clinician so that the clinician can remotely watch them and kind of, try to do diagnosis that way. The way we and a lot of other people prefer to do telehealth diagnosis is this live way. So we're actually interacting with folks in real time. So with young kids, we have procedures for both younger children and older children, and they look slightly different. So when we see younger children, what we tend to do is the clinician, us, are sitting behind our computer, and what we're doing is we're actually watching the child naturally play with their parent and interact with a comfortable person. We might ask the parents like, hey, could you try to point something out across the room and see if your child follows that point, or see if your kid looks at you. We might give them kind of prompts and scenarios, but mostly the easiest way for us to see a young child's social skills, a child with maybe only a couple words of verbal speech, is to watch them interacting with someone they're comfortable with. So I just wanted to show this is just a still. It's just a really brief nanosecond in time. But this is what it looks like from my view as a clinician, right? So this is from our study a couple years ago. It just got published, which is super exciting. But we were doing an assessment with this little guy and his caregiver. And what I was asking them to do is play with the toys that they naturally play with at home. And what's great about this is that it kind of takes away that element of, what if the kid's not comfortable in the clinic? Or what if the kid isn't comfortable with the person leading the assessment? And from an access perspective and an equity perspective, which we care about a lot at Search, it also kind of takes away some of these burdens that can fall on families who live in rural areas, underserved areas, might not have access to a reliable transportation, et cetera. So it lowers the bar for access, and it allows for kids to get these same diagnostic visits done, but from the comfort of their own home. So what does this look like for teens, older kids for whom playing with toys with their parents is not natural and wouldn't really tell us anything? For them, it looks very similar to your average day-to-day Zoom meetings that you probably all have. So this is another screenshot. I was interacting with this preteen, and we were just talking about stuff he does at school, his friends, what he does for fun. We looked at a picture together, and he pointed out the stuff he thought was pretty interesting, stuff like that. So it looks like stuff you all probably do on the day-to-day. And that allows us as clinicians to actually talk to kids and teens and get their perspective on their emotions, their friendships, their social skills, and also kind of assess how good they are at interacting with someone whom, they've just met, is a relatively comfortable person, and we can sort of get an idea of their level of social skills that way. So, of course, the most important question is, does this work, right? If it doesn't work and it's not accurate, then even if it's more convenient, we're not going to use it, because we want to make sure that this is actually as accurate, or hopefully very close to as accurate as our in-person procedures. So the good news is papers from us and other folks around the country who are doing their own versions of this, it is pretty accurate compared to in-person, which is super, super exciting. And again, I'm really hopeful that this can kind of lower access barriers that people experience. But there's caveats, right? Nothing is perfect. So the caveat here is that telehealth tends to work best for younger children or those who have less spoken language. There's a couple reasons for that. I only have a couple minutes, so I'm going to sort of briefly go over them. But part of it is that if you have an older teen, like let's say there's a teen who's between 12 and 16, and they're only getting a possible autism diagnosis for the first time at that age, then kind of by default, they're going to have less obvious and overt symptoms of autism compared to the child that gets diagnosed at age 3. It's going to be less obvious. It's going to be more subtle. Their symptoms are probably a little bit hidden. Sometimes we call that masking, either by the child on purpose or just something they've learned to do over time. So when the symptoms are more subtle, it can be harder to kind of get at them over telehealth. It's harder to see the really subtle differences over the computer. The other thing we noticed is that telehealth is less accurate for kids who might have some social skills challenges, but it might be due to another diagnosis like ADHD. So if any of you have worked with or know kids with ADHD, sometimes they don't always have the best social skills because they're so hyperactive and they can be so excited to talk to you and tell you everything they know, or they can be so hyperactive that they're kind of running all around the room and you can't really assess them very accurately when you're doing it telehealth. So we've discovered over time that yes, it's accurate, but there are going to be some kids for whom it's more accurate and other kids for whom it's less accurate. The other piece of really, really good news is that parents actually seem to like telehealth. So the other thing we wanted to make sure is that parents find it acceptable and still feel like it's a good appointment. They're getting their concerns heard. We're getting an accurate picture of who their kid is. We want to make sure that parents are satisfied with it and don't feel like it's a shortcut and don't feel like it's a less robust or less good appointment. So that's other really good news is parents are pretty happy overall with the telehealth appointment. And our future goals here is to continue refining the measure, continue testing it. We're applying for national grants from the National Institute of Health, NIH, to continue this work and fund it. So fingers crossed we can keep doing it. And hopefully, like I said, it'll decrease some of these really high barriers to access that folks both in the Inland Empire and beyond tend to feel. I'm going to turn it back over to Jan to talk about our adult autism study.
Thank you, Catherine. And a good segue was one of the last things Catherine mentioned, that autism is less obvious in older kids or teens. It's even more subtle in college students, particularly college-ready students like those that attend UCR. Ever since SEARCH opened, we've had students wander into our office asking if we could assess them. They think they have autism. What should they do? And we weren't ready to do that. First of all, there were no protocols available nationally to do that without involving their parents. And the majority of the students who come to us say, I don't want my parent involved in this. This is something I think I have. I don't want to tell them. So currently, we've just embarked on a study to develop best practices for autism diagnosis in college-age adults. This is the recruitment flyer, and you will happily get one of those in your post-webinar packet from our team. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, I told you that students have come to us, and they've, through our own research and through the things they've told us, we realize there are a lot of reasons that we should be doing this. Students feel that they're not fitting in socially at college. Some of them want accommodations from Disability Resource Center, and they don't have any other disability at hand. They often need to make healthcare decisions on their own. They don't want parents involved. So we decided that it would be important to develop a protocol that could be done with college-age students without their parent involvement. Next slide, please. And to underscore this, you can see the comparison on this slide. Catherine was very, very good at describing the parent's role in our assessments. We have a number of measures that we use. We point them to resources. We're constantly training qualified assessors. For these college-age adults, we are trying to develop a tool that's validated, that doesn't involve parents, that will utilize diagnostic criteria that are different than for children. So hopefully this study will lend itself to a protocol we can publish and be used nationally. Next slide, please. Why do this? Well, the students themselves have told us there are a lot of reasons we should do this. I mean, starting from the bottom, receiving an autism diagnosis for a college student who suspects he, she, or they is on the spectrum can really benefit them socially and help them, you know, to have a more positive self-concept or self-identity. The protocol itself will sort of generate more and better research. And this kind of research, our hope is that it will benefit the participants directly because it will help them better access mental health services. They know what they have, they know what they need. Next slide, please. So what do we know about college-age autistic students? We know that their life at UCR isn't always smooth sailing. And these kids face numerous challenges. They may go along for a while and then hit a bunch of bumps in the road. And it's up to us, the faculty and other people, to provide a more neurodiversity affirming environment. But to date, a lot of colleges have not been neurodiversity affirming. These students report struggles with roommates, with faculty, with adapting to dorm life. And next slide, please. And we pulled a couple of quotes from our research that I will show you, but before I do, they reflect these factors that the autistic college students mentioned, and even ADHD students who are also part of this study. The number one issue is always whether to disclose. Do I disclose my identity or not? To my roommates, to my peers, to my faculty. Other issues, as I mentioned, involve peers, housing decisions, and academic decisions. Next slide, please. So this is a student who, in the context of talking about whether or not he should disclose his autism, said, most people don't really have a good idea of what autism is. You're either curled up in the corner in the fetal position, rolling back and forth, or you're totally normal. And there's nothing in between. So I tend not to tell people that I've been diagnosed just because I don't want it to be part of how they see me. It's just one thing about you, but it's not what defines you. Another student in the same study who was from the ADHD group mentioned that he was hesitant to report that to his faculty member, who said, well, I don't believe in ADHD as a diagnosis. And finally, in responding to peer interactions, this student said, the student transition from high school to college is a gigantic one for anybody to take. I can't tell if mine's that much worse, but I can tell that it's a lot harder to make friends. My issue, more or less, is keeping friends and finding good friends. I would say the impact autism mostly has on people is in forming social relationships. So these first-person examples, these quotes, became the bedrock of a documentary called Autism Goes to College. Now I'll transition to filmmaker Erik Linthorst, who is here today to tell you about that film and other forms of storytelling and social media that can really help elevate awareness and understanding of autism. Erik, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jan, very much for that. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the Autism Goes to College project, and then I'll show you the trailer for the film, and I'll give you a quick tour of the online resource center that we have that is free and available to the public. The project started as a documentary film that chronicles the stories of 5 autistic college students over the course of a year of college life. The film premiered at the Newport Beach Film Festival and was an official selection at the renowned South by Southwest EDU Education Conference. And then we went on a national campus tour, which included live in-person screenings at over 75 colleges and campuses. When the pandemic shut down our in-person events, we created a podcast to continue the conversation. That podcast of the same name, Autism Goes to College, is in its 6th season. In 2022, the podcast, along with the film, won a Webby Anthem Award for Best of the Internet. And one of the things we did since we had the film and the podcast is create an online resource center, which we'll share the links of that with all of you. The online resource center expanded our offerings to include video stories, audio episodes, and blogs written by and for autistic college kids trying to navigate college life. We're incredibly proud of this project, and we have the Search Center and specifically Dr. Blacher to thank for creating the spark and the funding that has allowed this project to thrive. As a UCR grad myself, it has been an extra special honor to produce this work for my alma mater. And the work continues. We are now working on a follow-up film looking at autism in the workplace and are filming content that will be available probably early next year on our website under the banner Beyond College. So with that, I'm going to show you the trailer for the film, and then I'll give you a quick tour of our online resource center and point out some of the resources that are available in case you want to access them yourselves or you know somebody who might benefit from from these resources. So here's the trailer for the film.
I went to college without a real idea on what I was going to be. I just knew go to college because that's where you can get a job. What job? Well, that's something you have to figure out, Guillermo.
I hope to eventually pass this entire college and then move onward to become an animator for an animation company.
Throughout my whole life, it's been hard figuring out how I was going to be able to succeed as much as my peers and compare to them.
I'm undeclared, but they really want me to push towards biology. And then that's when I learned something about myself. I can't stand this stuff.
My dad drove me to the dorm, helped me unpack, and once everything was done, he's like, all right, cool, see ya. And that was the start of my adult life.
There's a lot of good things about college compared to high school. Like, for one, I don't have to get up at 6 in the morning anymore, and so I'm not falling asleep the whole day. My second year kind of was very similar to my second year in high school, which was really academically struggling point for me. So like my parents were constantly like telling me go seek out counseling. During one of those counseling sessions, I ended up disclosing to them, yeah, I'm autistic.
Jonathan stood up and said they're doing a documentary about me on autism. And I saw some students kind of sit up a little bit and say, oh, that's what's going on. And it was almost like there was this acceptance.
I had to let him go, and he has to go and fly. He's a man, and he has to be the best he can be. I have a bunch of friends now, surprisingly, because I didn't have friends up until a year ago.
So I'm trying to not let my anxiety get the best of me.
Good.
Yeah.
Eventually, I worked out with the counselors to just breathe in and out, think to myself that I can do this.
My parents sat down with me and said, you just need to go and at least try it.
So worked up about what's happening now, but then everyone told me that I have to look for the future. And the future is looming over my shoulder. I don't know what to do.
Okay, so that's the trailer for the film.
Milson loves
Excuse me.
rocks.
That's not. Now I'm going to give you a quick tour of our online resource center. So you can find this all and all of our resources at autismgoestocollege.org, and we're going to share that link with you also. And autismgoestocollege.org is really the home for everything we have. It's where you can access the film and you can access the podcast series and all of the other things that we have available. It's organized by topic here. You'll see there's a section for the film. If you want to rent the film and watch it as a sort of traditional documentary film, you can do that through this link here. We have the entire podcast series, which again is in its 6th season. So there's nearly 60 episode archive that you can watch. And I'll take you through some of those episodes here in a moment. And then we have the blog series here over on the right. These are written by and for autistic college students talking about different aspects of college life and how they've managed to navigate them. We also have blogs by helpers, people in the disability office, or professors, or people that therapists that have advice for young college students. We have a whole section, you'll see over here on the left, we have a whole section for choosing a college. These are different stories from students talking about how they chose a college, advice from college counselors on specifically if you're on the spectrum, how to choose the right college. So you can access a lot of content around choosing a college. Over here on the right, you'll see we have a whole section on getting help. So you've made it to college, now you're on campus and you're in crisis. How do you get help if you're having trouble with a professor? How do you get help if you're having trouble with a roommate? How do you get help if you're having trouble academically or socially or emotionally? So we have a whole section of resources on that. Then we have a section here over on the left, college living. So you're on campus, hopefully you're having some fun. So ways of breaking out of your shell, making friends, how to navigate too many food options at the cafeteria, executive functioning, how to plan your schedule when you're away from home for the first time. We have all kinds of resources for that. We have a whole section on interviews here. You'll see with different professors, people from the Disabled Student Services offices, parents, and students as well. And then we've got a whole section for professors. So this is both, for professors that have an interest in meeting the needs of their neurodiverse students, but maybe just don't know how. There's a NeuroPrep self-paced course they can take here that they can access through our website. And then finally, down on the right, we have student stories. So these are our first-person stories from our autistic college students talking about every aspect of college life, from looking at it from high school, trying to figure out where to apply, through their freshman year and on through graduation. The podcast series has 6 seasons. You can watch them here. We've got a YouTube link. You can watch the video version of the podcast, which is a new initiative we've launched this year. You can listen to them on all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And here you'll see just the range of stories we're telling. A lot of these people, like Dom here in episode 56, has just graduated from Bridgewater State. Dom is somebody that we've had on the podcast now 4 times. So we have tracked his entire college career. He's come and visited us and told us how things were going freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, now that he's graduated. So you can kind of follow along all the ups and downs that he's had. We had the chance to interview Dr. Barry Prezant, a pioneering autism researcher. That was a great episode, 55. This is an autistic college student, Quincy, who's also happens to be an RA. So he tells his story of not only navigating freshman year himself, but helping other freshmen on the spectrum navigate college. We have non-degree granting pathways being profiled here. Abigail tells about her experience at Kent State, about the application process, all different kinds of storytelling from all different perspectives: community college, 4-year university, graduate school, non-degree granting pathways. We even had our first non-speaking graduate from UC Berkeley come on and do an episode with us talking about his experience as the first non-speaking autistic student to graduate with honors, by the way, from Cal. This is another example. Perry here, who has come to the podcast, has shared quite an incredible college journey with us. She started out back east at Hamilton College. That didn't work out. She came back home, took some time to regroup, went to Santa Monica City College, and wound up at UCLA, where she is currently thriving. She's been back to the podcast multiple times to tell us all about that. So all of this is available for free, open to the public. Please let people know about this resource. We're proud of this, and we know that the work is not going to stop here. It's going to continue as we continue to tell stories, both of autistic college students, but also what happens after they graduate in our Beyond College work. So with that, I will hand things back over to our fearless leader, Jan.
Hi, everyone. So we're going to move over to the Q&A section. I just want to thank Jan, Erik, and Catherine. Thank you so much for providing your knowledge and expertise. So we're going to go ahead and start with the Q&A. I'll start with question 1. And this is to anyone, so whoever wants to answer. Can a child have ADHD and autism at the same time?
Catherine, you take that. I'll take the next one.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yes, they can. In fact, the two co-occur very often. Some estimates are as high as, I've seen 60% even. But yes, they co-occur often. It's a really common thing to have both. And it does tend to be pretty tricky to tell the difference between them. It was not always the case that a child could be diagnosed with both, but it is the case now in the clinical psychology community that a child can have both.
Thank you. Okay, next one. Are there any eligibility criteria for assessments? For example, age or income restrictions?
I'll take that one. One of the, in fact, I see the next one, so I may take these together.
Okay.
One of the reasons that we started Search was to provide, not only to provide autism services to the entire IE, since there was next to none there, but particularly to low-income parents who had no insurance or no other way to get their child assessed. So there are no income restrictions. We are still to this day a no-cost clinic. That could change, but it hasn't changed in about 18 years. So no income restrictions. As for age, most of the instruments we use are fully valid at, let's say, 2.5. We usually like to see kids at 3. Because of the reliability of the assessment instruments. At some point, we may lower our assessment to toddlers because there is a widely used valid toddler instrument. But think of it as 3 to 12. And as I said in the introduction, for various reasons, sometimes we go outside that margin.
Okay. Next one is what sets Search apart from other autism research centers, and why is that differentiation important for our communities?
Should I just continue? Because I sort of touched on that.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Catherine or Erik. That's really what sets us apart. I mean, let's get real. The fact that we don't charge anything is huge. And there aren't a lot of places that do that. And we can do it because we use student help as our assessors, and that training and that ability to have a flow of graduate students makes that possible. The other thing that sets us apart is sort of this living laboratory notion, right in the School of Ed, having students rotate in who may have related projects, and everything kind of builds on everything else. So it provides a really nice, almost like a petri dish of learning about autism. Catherine, anything else that you think is important that differentiates us?
I think one thing that differentiates us is that we do kind of follow families throughout the whole process. We do get a lot of families who come to us for consultation because they've gotten a written report, but no one actually reviewed it with them. So like a clinician will just hand them or email them a report and say like, okay, bye. And there isn't any follow-up or kind of explanation of exactly what the report says and why. So sometimes we, with parents' permission, of course, read over their reports and sort of, quote unquote, translate it to the real world. Like, why did the clinician say your kid did or did not have autism? And I think it's really, really important to do that. So I'm very proud that Search kind of follows all the way through and makes sure that parents understand why we decided to diagnose or not diagnose their child with autism.
Okay, the next one is for assessments concluding a person is on the milder aspect of the autism spectrum. Are the recommended resources or professionals more local to the Search headquarters, or are they contacted as another telehealth session?
Yeah, so if we conclude that someone has autism but maybe is less significantly impacted, we usually try to provide resources that are tailored to that person. So let's say, for example, that we see a teenager and we conclude that they have autism, but they also maybe have some anxiety or some symptoms of depression. Then we might recommend something like one-on-one behavioral therapy. We might recommend that they go to the school and see if they're eligible for extra time on tests if they experience test anxiety, stuff like that. So we try to be really specific about what we recommend and make sure that it is tailored to each person that we actually see and their individual concerns. But we usually we don't really see people twice. We don't usually need to see someone twice to make a diagnostic decision, but that's kind of our genuine overview.
Great. Next question is, what is the biggest obstacle in virtual assessments?
I can probably answer that one. I touched on it a little bit. I'd say the biggest obstacle is going to be what you just asked about, the other person just asked about kind of folks that are on the more quote unquote mild end of the spectrum who are less significantly impacted. It can be challenging to diagnose those people even in person. So it's also difficult to diagnose over the computer because there's some really subtle things about social communication that we're not perfect at getting over the computer. For example, can anyone tell if I'm making eye contact with them right now? No, because I'm not actually looking in someone's eyes. I'm looking at my computer camera to try to make look natural. If I were to make quote eye contact with Bree, I'd be doing this, right? So, and that's not going to feel like eye contact to her. So those kinds of things are tricky. And then similar to what I said before, the other obstacle would be if a kid has a lot of hyperactivity and they're kind of just like running around in circles and can't quite sit still to do the assessment procedures. In person, we have more cool toys and stuff to look at. Trying to have a kid who's young sit in front of a computer can be a challenge.
Next one is it safe to say that college students with autism are more on the Asperger's side of autism or on the Asperger's side of the autism spectrum?
Yes and no. We don't really use the term Asperger's anymore, but it is safe to say that those who are in college, particularly competitive four-year college like UCR, certainly have no cognitive impairment, okay? These are bright, college-ready students who are at a competitive University of California system. However, it is a misconception that those in college are not as symptomatic as the stereotype of autism. If we were able to show the entire film, Autism Goes to College, I think you would see, or the audience sees the variety of autistic characteristics that these students have. I'm thinking, Erik, particularly of Jonathan, who is, very symptomatic in college. He has repetitive behaviors. He, in fact, flaps. He talks to himself. He has extraneous behaviors and makes odd, loud noises when he's upset or frustrated. You don't often see that in college students, but you might. So I think we're trying to spread the broader understanding of what autism is, and each person is different and they carry their own set of symptoms.
These are all wonderful questions. We have a lot coming in, so let's dive into the next one. Do students with late diagnosis struggle more in college compared to the students who were diagnosed when they were younger?
That's a difficult question to answer because we don't have any data on that.
Mm.
That's a good question, be a great study. So thank you, whoever wrote that question. Catherine, take note. We certainly in the current study ask the students when they were diagnosed, but I think the answer is probably we don't know. And at this point, it's not predictive. Because often when kids are diagnosed very early, they are very symptomatic. But if they have excellent early intervention and great speech therapy, they could end up at UCR or UCLA. And it's really, none of us have a crystal ball. And that saying is particularly important for autism. We don't know the trajectory of each one of these kids.
Thank you. So we've gotten some wonderful questions for Jan and Catherine. I want to move over to one question that we got for Erik, just because we're running short on time. For Erik, will you be making another documentary film to add on to the previous one? And what would you address if you made another film?
Yeah, so we are working on a follow-up film about autism in the workplace that's going to kind of start where the other film left off, which is kind of what happens, after graduation. And there's a lot to map there because unlike, college, even with its various pathways, it's a fairly prescribed sort of route and institution, whereas the workplace can look like just about anything. So there's a lot of different types of jobs that we're looking at, a lot of different resources that are out there, state funded, federally funded resources that open up some pathways. but sometimes you look a little closer and some of the help isn't all that helpful. And so we want to help to tease out kind of what's working and what's not, both to be instructive for those trying to provide help, but also for those navigating a rather maze-like architecture. What are the best ways for them to help their loved one get meaningfully employed? So we're working on that. We have some early grant funding. We are continuing to work with the Search Center on this project to again center the story around the real life experiences of autistic young adults that are navigating the next chapter. And then the podcast continues, so that the storytelling around college continues as well through the podcast. And we hope to continue that, as long as we can keep the team together. We have a great UCR grad student in Catherine O'Brien, who is our host, who is helping to make the podcast an ongoing project. And every month we publish new episodes, so hopefully that'll continue the storytelling as well.
Thank you. So we have one last question. I just want to squeeze it in because it's a good one. In addition to the amazing work Erik is doing, what are some ideal partnerships that could benefit the work that Search is doing?
Well, there are a lot of partnerships. I mean, there's partnerships with our brand, Autism Goes to College. Erik, if you want to add to that, and then Catherine and I can expand on from the research end.
I mean, yes, partnerships, like we've been reaching out to various organizations, some of them quite big companies that have, neurodiversity affirming programs, some Fortune 500 companies, big tech companies. So we're wide open to partnerships with organizations that already have a stated interest in recruiting and including neurodivergent workers in their companies. Those kinds of partnerships, but also, really looking for funding sources. So large national nonprofits that make helping autistic adults find employment. They can help us help them by funding our projects. So we're always open to those partnerships as well. And then I would say on the podcast side, we have been in conversations with PRX, which is the largest distributor of nonprofit podcasts. We've done some cross promotions with them. They produce things like This American Life and Ear Hustle. So they don't have anything in the neurodiversity space, and so we've been doing some rather interesting exploration with them around how we can partner to expand our audience.
Catherine and I have been really vigorously trying to partner with other agencies in the Inland Empire, particularly where we know there are underserved populations, Indian tribes, Indian affairs. We know from looking at statewide data from the Department of Developmental Services that the numbers suggest there are a lot of people that aren't being served. They're very, very, very small numbers represented on the statewide data set. So that's one way we've been reaching out. We've reached out to other local colleges. I collaborate with people at UMass Boston, UCLA. Catherine, you have collaborations. We have not reached out to corporations for our research, but we may have to, the way the federal government is going. But have I left something out, Catherine, that, no? Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. I do have to cut time just because we're a little bit over, but thank you again so much to you, Jan, Catherine, and Erik, for sharing your time, your expertise, and experiences with us today. Your work really continues to make a meaningful impact throughout our research, education, advocacy, and storytelling, and we're so grateful for your dedication to supporting individuals and families throughout our communities. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're truly appreciative of your time, your engagement, and continued connection to UC Riverside. As a part of our Brilliant Minds UCR webinar series, we look forward to continuing to showcase all the innovative work of our faculty, researchers, alumni, and our community leaders. We hope you will join us next time for our future events. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.